Welcome back, everyone, to our last podcast of this summer for OCA-WHV. OCA is a non-profit organization for the fifth time. OCA is a non-profit organization with a mission to advance the social, political, and economic well-being of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. And as YOCA members, we focus on key issues and topics facing Asian youth on a daily basis. And we are the WHV branch, which means we are the Westchester Hudson Valley branch of the National Organization of OCA. Today's topic will be focusing on understanding advocacy movements and pastoral legislation and how high school students can contribute to AAPI advocacy efforts.
All right, so since this is our last one, we're first going to actually introduce OCA-WHV in more detail. So Emily will just read the introduction.
Founded in 1973, OCA is a national 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to securing the rights of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans, or APIAs, through initiatives at all levels of government.
Guys, this is actually the 50th year anniversary.
Happy birthday, OCA.
The OCA Westchester and Hudson Valley chapter, or OCA-WHV, is one of over 50 chapters and affiliates across the United States that strives to develop leadership, community involvement, and civic participation for all APIAs.
All right. Okay, so that's
a great explanation, Emily. Thank you very much.
Guys, try to find your local OCA chapter and join to help promote AAPI advocacy.
So names. Hello, everyone. My name is David. My name is Ken.
I'm Sophie.
I'm Emily.
I'm Anderson.
All right. So part of the advocacy that OCA, and more specifically YOCA, does is... Sorry, the door just randomly shut.
I think there's a ghost.
Yeah, but part of the advocacy that OCA, more specifically YOCA, does is they run internship programs, and YOCA-WHV this summer ran multiple internship programs, one of which is this podcast that you are listening to.
Promote diversity and inclusion.
Right, and we also have a summer reading program, which we recently finished, but you should join us next year.
Yeah,
if you
definitely
are
join us.
What is the summer reading program? I'm interested. Thanks, David. I'd love to explain it. Our summer reading program is, well, this year it was targeted at 4 to 7 year olds, but next year we're hoping to expand to other age groups.
And hopefully 8 to 12, like maybe 2 sessions, one for 4 to 7 and one for 8 to 12.
Yeah. So we read different children's books that are either written by AAPI or
about AAPI.
Yeah, and also promote messages of inclusion and understanding and acceptance. So it doesn't have to be necessarily AAPI. Like our last session, we read a book called Say Something, which is all about speaking up when you see something that
is morally wrong.
Right, exactly. And so this is one of our advocacy efforts where we are, supporting the community and also trying to, I guess our first book we read was I Am an American. So that book talked about ideas of like what makes someone American, and it also talks about like Chinese immigration in the U.S. So not only like inclusion and diversity, but we also try to add a little bit of education and history into it. But with the 4 to 7 age range, it's a little difficult. But I think we did a great job this past summer, and we look forward to doing it again next summer.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we have plenty of snacks and activities throughout this program, so drop in when you guys have time.
Yeah, if you're in the area.
Yeah.
In the Westchester Hudson Valley there.
Yeah. So this year it was at Greenberg Public Library, and I think we're hopefully expanding the Chappaqua Library, so drop in.
Yeah, so that's just one example of some of the, I guess, advocacy efforts that YOCA
has. There obviously OCA isn't the only organization or movement advocating for AAPI and HPI. And so maybe we can discuss some of the advocacy movement like on a broader scale. Somebody would like to speak to that?
So there's also another organization that commonly works with OCA called JCL, also known as Japanese American Citizens League. If anyone is Japanese, I guess, or has any Japanese ancestry, you're welcome to check out this organization and also help advocate for AAPI rights.
Issues.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk about some legislation that has positively impacted us. David, I think you know this a little better than us.
I'll speak to the Hate Crime Statistics Act, which was mentioned on a previous podcast. But basically, what this does was it better streamline the process for collecting evidence and reporting racial intent, because there has been a significant increase in hate crimes in the previous decades, and more specifically in the past few years with the coronavirus pandemic. And what this does is it basically identifies pattern trends. In this better identifies pattern trends towards advocacy efforts for better documentation, because the more evidence you have about a case of racial intent, the better it is for the prosecution to win and correctly arrive at justice. This was a bill that was passed in 2021, also referred to as the Coronavirus Hatred Act, Hate Crimes Act.
Yeah, Hate Crimes Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've also been pushing some other bills in Congress. You all right?
Definitely being focused right now.
Okay, so we're also pushing some other current bills in Congress, like the Stop Mental Health Stigma Act. There's also
Neighbors Not Enemies.
Neighbors Not Enemies. Let me find the last one.
There's like the education.
Teach AAPI History Act.
Yeah.
Right. And so Sophie, myself, and Emily we were recently at the OCA 50th
anniversary convention in Washington, D.C.
Whoops. sorry. It's okay, cut.
Now leave that in.
Someone leave this entire thing unedited.
This shows so how real we are and how authentic this podcast is, speaking to key Asian American issues.
Totally not scripted, guys.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
These
are our from our dome. There's no scripting. Everything out of
yeah, so we were recently in DC and we had the chance to go to Capitol Hill and speak to some representatives
and senators about these bills.
So some elected officials and their, I guess, secretaries, aides, I guess that's the right word, about these bills that we just mentioned. So these are ones that are either...
They're all being pushed.
Yeah, some have been introduced, others have not. So these are bills that we need to push more, like bring awareness to. If you just want to like send a cold email to like your representative saying, hey, like I think this is a bill you should support, that even just doing that will bring more awareness to these bills and help push it.
Just so you guys know, the Teach AAPI History Act is also known as S1546. Stop Mental Health Stigma in Our Communities Act is HR 3680, and Neighbors Not Enemies Act is S1747.
What is the Neighbors Not Enemies bill trying to achieve?
So Neighbors Not Enemies Act is trying to repeal the Alien Sedition Act, which was back during like World War One.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually goes all the way back to like the 1700s with John Adams.
It's one of 4.
Yeah. So 3 of the 4 have expired, but there's one that still stands today, saying that if any war breaks out and any citizen
of a nation we are at war with
that is not an American citizen can be important,
solely because of their
race.
nationality.
Yeah, an example of this was obviously the Japanese internment camps during World War II, where they were all forcibly removed from their town to go into this little group
concentration camps.
Concentration camp.
They were concentration
camps. We won't argue that point.
But the importance of these bills is to show how like there's currently legislative action being done and spreading more like education on these actions. Like for example, I didn't know what the what is it?
Neighbors not enemies.
Neighbors not enemies bill does, but just like simply by knowing about these bills, you can like talk about it more, and contact more people towards it. Similar to how like the Hate Crime Statistics Act was passed, these bills can also be passed if enough support is seen among Asian American.
And not even just among the Asian American communities, among the public.
Any listener can do this. You don't have to be in the AAPI community.
We love allies. Alright.
Yeah, like just as a thing, OCA doesn't only like OCA partners with other organizations that advocate for issues on behalf of other minority groups.
Guys, we partnered with Walmart.
Yeah, so like
and McDonald's.
As minorities, like we need to sort of group together to fight for ourselves. So like you don't have to be Asian to help support these acts, just as you didn't have to be like black to support the BLM movement.
Yeah.
So
I think also this also speaks to like the political representation of our government currently, which is the fact that only 3.4% of Congress is Asian American or AAPI, and we need to increase our representation at least to allow for us to focus on key AAPI issues like the bills being proposed, and so we can address them. And the best way to do that is by voting. Go vote if you're able to, guys.
If you're of age, your vote counts.
Your vote counts. I think you have to be 18 to vote. So go register to vote and then go vote.
Yes. I received a mail-in ballot because I'm registered in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay. However, there's currently many challenges in the Asian American community with political representation and advocacy. Firstly, is the
unfamiliarity with the legal political system. Like a lot of Asian immigrants, not Asian immigrants. Well, this is mainly
immigrants in general.
Yeah.
But it could be. It could say. Could that be said about the general Asian Americans, like not having the right to vote? Because like
most Asian countries do not give you the right to vote as of throughout history.
Yeah. Throughout history, not a lot of Asian immigrants have had the right to vote in their former countries.
For example, North Korea, China, Vietnam, all the communist countries.
Myanmar.
And also a lack of understanding in the political system means that they might not know, like, with language barriers as well, they might not know how to register to vote.
Yeah.
Or they, like, when people are campaigning, they're campaigning in English, so they might not know who to vote for. They might not feel as though anyone's campaigning for them. And so, like, why should I vote for you, sort of thing.
And sometimes, like, even on the ballots, there aren't, like, the names aren't in Chinese or Japanese or other languages. And even if they gave out sample ballots, the actual order on the ballot that they would actually be voting on could also be different. And so
this goes back to the advocacy effort called the Federal Language Access Act, which is a bill currently proposed that allows for language assistance primarily in governmental interactions, so like voting ballots and all these things to foster more political representation inside government. Also, low key, I don't know how to vote. As in, like,
it's okay.
It's okay.
Our school registers us in 12th grade history class.
Yeah, but the fact that like someone who's been living in the United States for like forever, basically my whole entire life, does not know how to vote.
Not gonna lie, I don't really know how to vote either. But that's okay. That's why we're here to learn.
So like thinking about like how an Asian immigrant would go out of their way to cast in one ballot, like
and they might not even know when like when they're supposed to be voting.
Yeah, because they're not familiar with the government or the language barrier, as well as not being familiar with government, because they might not know the election cycles and who is for who.
They may not know where to go, how to vote, who to vote for.
I think a successful instance of Asian representation is within Flushing, which is Chinatown. At least during the election. At least during the election cycles, when I visited, there were a lot of campaign signs and just people walking around, because this is an Asian American community. So just by spreading that advocacy effort to show what to
we
do,
care about you.
Yeah.
And just speaking to the language barrier, there's this joke among second generation immigrants where their parents might not necessarily speak the language the best. So there's a 12-year-old kid translating government documents of their parents. And so again, that speaks to the language barrier that exists and why we should really push for this Language Access Act, to where these government documents and voters registration is more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I think
you don't traumatize your kid by asking them to translate something. If you couldn't tell, that was a joke.
Yeah. I think another challenge or another key issue right now is critical race theory among governments, among our government and legislation.
Yeah, state governments.
So Ken, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so this actually isn't a new movement. I think this started back kind of mid-COVID, maybe late 2020, 2021. But a lot of schools started teaching critical race theory, which is a way of looking at the United States through a more, critical lens, looking at conscious and unconscious biases, and also systemic racism that exists to this day. And so a lot of states and schools pushed back on this syllabus is the word, because it's a very critical lens to look at the United States through, to accept that we still have racist systems in place, and the fact that racism cannot exist without racists existing. And so it's an uncomfortable topic for many, but one that I believe needs to be taught and at least spoken about.
Yeah, I think the current major landmark state that it is occurring in is Florida, with where there is current topics of I think book burnings as well, book burnings and just erasure of certain materials. I think that Florida also, I saw this on social media recently about how there is this conference between Florida and um a AP psychology, because of certain materials inside that is critical race theory related, how the governments or how society is against certain minority or certain ideologies. And this can definitely be harmful because it erases, because it's an erasure of minority struggles, and that's obviously not good, because we should focus on the struggles to address them. We can't just put our heads in the sand and pretend they don't exist, hoping they would go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm looking at a map here, and there are currently 16 states that have banned critical race theory, 20 considering a ban, and 6 that have failed to pass a ban. And there are only 8 states that have no restriction whatsoever. So yeah, that just speaks to how this banning of critical race theory isn't a one-off thing with one state. It's a nationwide movement to stop this, because again, it's uncomfortable to admit that our country is inherently biased.
Yeah, it's like being seen as like unpatriotic to go against our governments. And it's because the people in our legislature are the people who we are calling racist, basically, in certain cases, or they assume we're calling them racist by saying how like our government is racist towards these group of people. It's definitely a very difficult and uncomfortable conversation for many legislators, but it's an important conversation we must have.
Right, because it falls on these elected officials to, I guess, fix these flawed systems that we still have in place. And so by saying like, oh, critical race theory is in a way saying these officials haven't done a great job. And that's, no one likes being criticized like that.
Nobody does.
I think now we'll also talk about virtue signaling, which is like current movements that have been seen to just not be effective sometimes, and just an example of someone patting themselves on the back, saying how like, oh, I am not a racist because I did this action.
I'm not racist because I have Asian friends. I have black friends, so I can't be a racist.
Yeah. I'm not racist because I posted a black square on my Instagram.
Right. So these sort of performative acts where you do something that like makes it seem like you are advocating for something or like doing something, but it's more so of a self-fulfilling act.
Yeah.
It's more so, oh, I posted a black square during BLM, I did it, guys. I did it.
I think it's definitely important to realize that like this is also showing awareness about a key issue of like, for example, Black Lives Matter. However, it's like simply not enough to just post a black square that also doesn't do much. Like you can have as much awareness as you want about an issue. Like I think we're all aware here that like racism exists, but we need to take proactive measures towards combating racism or combating Asian American issues. So like I guess this perfectly translates to our next topic of what you as or what high school students can do, because I assume most people listening to this might be high school students, or what Asian American people in general.
Really, anybody can do.
Yeah, what anyone can do. So I guess like firstly, just spreading education and awareness on key AAPI topics. Like for example, at least for me, in history class, like junior year, we're all told to write our research paper, and I chose my research paper on the model minority myth, researching the history of it, its impacts, its everything. And if you want to learn more about the model minority myth, go to our fourth podcast, the model minority myth podcast.
Do you want to link your essay in the description?
I'll link the essay in the description.
Sure.
Yeah, and like just like having that general education, because at least for me, I was unaware of these issues. Like obviously, as an Asian American, I faced discrimination in the past and like comments or things like that. But I know that like the advocacy efforts existed, or like the extensive history of Asian Americans, of like Vincent Chen, of these people. With like hate crimes and such until recently. So just like spreading that awareness onto like underclassmen or onto even like middle schoolers, or even with the summer reading program to elementary school students. So education,
or just talking to your friends.
Yeah, it's
like
something
just speak about these topics. Doesn't matter to who. Could be like maybe your parents, older like adults, or like David said, like younger kids. And just by speaking about these topics, you raise awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like sharing that personal experience with people around you, so like the friends, the communities, the teachers, and such. I think something else we can do is in the previous episode we talked about the glass ceiling, which is that Asian Americans do not hold leadership positions inside corporate America or like inside any group in general. So just a good way to combat this is just by running for a leadership position. So personally, I'm in student government myself. I'm the president, and just like running running for those positions and like being out there to advocate for like personal beliefs and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. And so you can have your own like beliefs and you can advocate for Asian American issues.
Right. So you can look for like local initiatives that.
I'm sorry.
No worries. You can look for local initiatives on maybe like a certain bill that is being pushed, or just reaching out to like representatives, writing a letter or writing an email to your local representative about like, oh, I think this certain thing is an issue. Like, I want you to support this. Even just as an individual, you might think like, oh, they're this elected official, they're super important. Like, who am I to just write an email? But
part of the reason they're up there is maybe because of you.
Right. So because they're representing you. And so
they also want to get reelected next year, which means that they need to like have like make people that
they need
represent
that community engagement.
Yeah.
And so
I think this goes more for like the local level because these people actually read your letters instead of sending you like a default reply back. Because I still remember in like 7th grade we were all told to email I think like Andrew Cuomo.
Right. Yeah.
And then like the response we got back was the most default NPC response. It was just like, we appreciate your concerns and we're working hard to like focus on these issues.
But even if you just get that, like even if it's only their secretary that saw your email, you're still.
But there's also a chance that like not to play devil's advocate, but like just put in the spam folder never to be seen again.
But you never know. Maybe they will see.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? It's better than not doing.
I think it's important, but like the most impact is on that local level with like your local representatives, maybe your mayor, maybe your people who represents your town, because those are people that affects your life far more. And this also speaks to just American politics in general. How people often focus on presidential elections, like every 4 years. Wow, it's the president, so cool. However, the most important, the president has little impact on your day-to-day life. Like obviously there's big policies that gets passed and like with the economy, with military stuff like that. But the greatest impact you have is for your local legislators. So every 2 years, I think.
Yeah, and, like, those elections are even here in New York.
Yes.
Yeah. Every 2 years, every even 2 years here. And I think that these people have a higher impact on your life. So why not elect a person you actually think is going to represent your beliefs or Asian American beliefs in general?
Yeah, so just as a final reminder, guys, join your local OCA chapter. This can be your another step in
if you're in the Westchester Hudson Valley area, come to tell our president that the interns at the podcast sent you, and that would be great.
That would be really good, guys.
That would be good. So we can continue this program next year and keep expanding.
We require you to continue
We'll
helping.
also link the OCA website down below, and then you can also see the different advocacy efforts that OCA in general is focusing on. I think we talked a little bit about this before, about the summer reading program, or like this podcast in general, or just other like, I think there was a Zoom meeting yesterday with like a personal experience of someone.
Yes, one of our other summer programs. But again, we are just we're just a local chapter in the New York area of this national organization, right? So we're just a small part in this advocacy effort. But every person matters in this. You know, your voice matters. Say something. If you're at our summer reading program, you would know. Say something. Show up next year.
All right. Thank you guys for listening, and tune in to our other podcasts. If not, then wait for next year.
Bye.